Welcome back to the United States of America, everybody. Full video right here on YouTube, or if you're listening in your car some way to work, thanks for listening on the iTunes experience or Google Play, wherever you get your podcast today. As you know, based on my voice or this ugly mug, I am one of your two co-hosts here, three-time Mr. Natural Olympia, Brandon Lirio, as well as amateur kind of strong powerlifter. And on the other end of the camera is my lovely co-host, tough as nails but smooth as velvet, Layla Pollock. Say hi to everybody.
Oop, wrong one. Do I know where my tattoos are? Velvet. Hi.
Hey, it's good enough for me. You know what else is good enough for me? Bodybuilding. The only problem is, I don't know if I like where it's going. So today, Layla and I are here to talk to you about the evolution of the sport of bodybuilding. So, you need only pick basically two athletes. One of the first ever in Eugene Sandow, who just so happens to be the absolute embodiment of what people would consider the inception of bodybuilding. That's why he is the trophy for the Mr. Olympia. And, I don't know, let's say Nick Walker, or even better would be Muhammad Elsbaye, better known as Big Ramy. And you take a look at the evolution of the sport of bodybuilding, and all these old heads, even older than myself, would basically tell you that the golden era of bodybuilding between Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, Mike Katz, these are the guys that were the golden era of what would be considered aesthetics, preceded mainly by the bronze era of Eugene Sandow, Bob Paris, even right in between those two would be the chemist, right? So what we're here to talk about today is not just the evolution of bodybuilding, but the evolution of whether or not we're headed toward a new golden era or what would be considered just a different sport altogether. So, Layla, let me ask you.
God damn it.
Taking a look at men and women in today's sport, do you find the sport of bodybuilding to be aesthetic in the way that you would like to watch it? No? Even being drawn to the sport, you don't like it?
When have I ever answered any question with yeah, I like that. That's cool.
I think when I asked you about food one time.
Like cats.
Yeah.
And alpha rates. I feel like, and I think most people would agree with this, the extreme to which we take bodybuilding, where our skin is paper thin and we're all veined out and kind of grainy looking, that's not really attractive. Is it admirable? Yeah.
So, you have seen the older photos of,
you're talking about, old times?
No. That's what I'm asking you. I'm now going back, where I would say, if you took a look at when Arnold was competing, or basically right before Dorian Yates' era, which is really when they considered the inception of the mass monster between Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, and Dorian Yates, was really these big guys that started to just be so big and so shredded and dry that you couldn't not see them. They're right there, so big you can't miss them, right? And the argument now, especially in natural bodybuilding, you have guys who are bigger than some of the other guys on stage losing because it literally doesn't look like anyone else, and they're like, that's not really where we want that side of the sport to be headed toward. So if you take a look at the eras of bodybuilding, would you prefer to see, from a female side, the original era of women's bodybuilding competitors, which wasn't dry, wasn't super striated, was more about a feminine fullness to the muscles and a real, which, don't get me wrong, if you watch any bodybuilding documentary, they were on steroids too. That's not really what I'm getting at. But sort of the blur of, let's get bodybuilders as dry, big, and shredded as possible.
That's tough. I think the general public that's an immediate yes for everybody, right?
For the ones who, are there to see something else, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, speaking for the general population, I think most people appreciate muscle on a woman, but not to the extreme that bodybuilding takes it, because it gets to that certain point. It's I don't say it's hard to look at, but it's not what people want to see.
So
me, myself, as a competitor, you know how I feel about conditioning.
Yeah.
I feel like conditioning That is my bread and butter. That is the thing that I think makes the sport actually what it is. But that's because I've always conflated bodybuilding with suffering, because I thought it was the sport of how much you could suffer.
Right there.
Because that's what made win shows for the longest time.
So that's the question, right? You're seeing that condition and going, the admiration and adoration I have for that is because I not only know how difficult it is, but how rare it is, as opposed to this is attractive. I'm drawn to this because it's attractive to me, you know, and attractive doesn't need to be physical, you know, like, oh, I want to date that person. There are physical attractive traits that I'm like, oh, I know that person is, I don't want to name them. There's a person I know who happens to be generally on TV, pretty famous, that I think she's beautiful. And my wife once said to me, like, oh, I bet you, and I went, I think that I know she's beautiful. Not for me. Even if I had a shot, which I don't, I wouldn't. Like, it's not my thing. I don't like it. You know what I mean? So I think that what we're talking about here is that general draw. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
No, I say that all. Like, I understand that person is attractive, but I don't care.
It's not for me, yeah.
That's not, yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly what I'm trying to say is, like, the sport of bodybuilding should be the regard for how much that individual did to bring it to the stage the way they did. Where I think so if I'm conflating bodybuilding with suffering, I think most people conflate bodybuilding with attractiveness, you know?
Fitness, I think, would be like, you know what I mean? Like,
okay, fitness. Yeah. Like, they want the person to walk out on stage and be, like, attractive. But attractive isn't what wins bodybuilding shows, you know? It's structure and definition and density and all that shit. Yeah, so for me personally, I mean, the thing that I think should win shows is when I see someone take off their warm-up and they're fully fucking conditioned. And they have, you know, everything else to support it, but especially the conditioning. That's when I'm like, you did the sport.
Yeah.
You did the sport. Yeah.
But
so I want to see personally, yes.
So do you think, though, that there is, and based on how you're saying it, like, I'll put it to you like this. Let's say there's a gauge that's 0 to 100, and you're like, how close you could get to being 0% body fat, at least figure and up, right? Because here's the thing, figure and physique and women's bodybuilding are supposed to be inherently different body fat categories, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question to you would be, is the meter a 0 to 100 meter, or should there be a line and you're either before it, meaning you're not conditioned enough, versus after it, where you're like, that's not even the same category. You shouldn't look like that. You know what I mean?
That's tough for me, because in my mind, what I always thought I was supposed to do for figure was get as fucking conditioned as possible. I was competing in the NPC.
Right.
Like, in order to hold my own with them, I was conditioned to fucking pieces. And I almost feel like it shouldn't or couldn't the divisions be based on just structure and how much muscle mass you have, but everybody is fully conditioned? A bikini competitor fully conditioned is going to look different than a figure competitor, is going to look different than a physique competitor. We all have to go through the same hardship, but the final package will look different, and you're going to be based on different things. Like,
yeah, but see, that's what I'm asking, right? Because when you say based on different things, right? What I'm more asking is, like, those based on different things is the judge's criteria. And the judge's criteria would say, if you're figure, your condition should look like this. Whereas if you're women's bodybuilding, you need to be 10 to 15% more conditioned. Not 10 to 15% from figure. I mean, percentage-wise on your body, you need to be near 0% body fat, or it's going to be nothing. You know what I mean?
But I guess I feel like I don't like conditioning being a criteria. Like, or rather, you see what I'm saying? I don't want figure to be a less conditioned
You just think it should be like a size difference.
Yeah, like size, structure, muscle mass, ultimately.
Interesting. So,
because, like I said, when I started the sport, I was convinced that conditioning won shows.
Sure.
And it is the hardest thing to do. It is the thing about the sport that I think we all know this. The diet is that hard part. Getting the conditioning right is the hard part. So why not expect all of your divisions to do that part of the sport and then let all the other chips fall where they may as far as your structure and your muscle? I don't know. I don't like the idea of trying to like gauge this line of how conditioned I'm supposed to be. I just want to go all the way.
Right.
All
Well,
way
the
down.
problem too is that becomes a problem in some of these other divisions where, classic for us. I won't say their Instagram handles, but I was reading a guy who has competed with multiple federations, who the different federations will tell him for classic, like, you're too big, or you're too conditioned, or you're too this. I had a competitor, Brian, compete this weekend who, let's just say, didn't place where we thought he should have, even though the guys who were beating him had like male muffin tops and no legs. And it's like, I don't like that. Like, I don't know about that. So, I guess the male equivalent of that wouldn't just be conditioning, but what people would consider over muscled for the category, which, is kind of laughable when you take a look at the NPC and you're like, dude, these men's physique guys it was supposed to be a very realistic division of a beach body, and these guys are 240. Like, what the fuck? There's no way. So
I guess maybe that's a part of it is if you don't do the conditioning, if you can't do the conditioning, if you are unwilling, it will automatically weed you out as a competitor. I don't know. That's what the sport is to me. I'm sorry. It's not just going in the gym and like lifting up heavy shit and looking good for the beach. It's not what the sport is to me.
Sure.
If you can't do conditioning, don't play.
So if we talk about the evolution of bodybuilding with all of this, which is very interesting, the one X factor is number of divisions, right? Back in the day, even if you had, which first of all was a hard sell to get women's bodybuilding on an equal footing as men's bodybuilding. It used to be like weird exhibitions at Coney Island and stuff like that. And the bodybuilding for them was like, if you had a little bicep peak, it was like over muscled. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering if part of the issue is the inclusion of different body types to the point where you need to make a new division. Now, let's take a look at like women's bikini to women's wellness to figure, right? Where it's like wellness was touted as women's bikini with figure-sized legs but less conditioning. For women that basically couldn't place in bikini because they weren't rail thin, but you still need to have that bikini upper body where you have a small waist, caps on your shoulders, but they're not figure-sized caps. That happened for about 6 shows. And now you take a look at the Wellness Olympia for the last 2 years, and you're like, these are centaurs.
They're
like,
horses!
They're not people. Which, by the way, I like that body type. I'm totally cool with it.
That's everybody's favorite.
Yeah,
honestly, let's be honest, everybody loves one.
Not overly conditioned, big glutes, big thick legs. Like, what's not to like, man? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Let's end it there. Wellness takes over everything. We're done.
But no, what I mean by that is, right, you start these other inclusions, and that's where these lines get blurred, where it's like, I see these girls coming out of Central America and South America, and I'm like, that girl is women's bodybuilding legs with like a figure-sized top, but it looks bikini because her legs are so big. Like, you see them in person, and it's, where were you built? Is this a Powerpuff Girls situation? What's happening? You know what I mean?
Brazil or Russia.
Crazy.
Sorry.
So my reason for bringing that up is just, this is where the line started to be blurred, was when men's bodybuilding was men's bodybuilding and women's bodybuilding was women's bodybuilding, and that was the show. You knew who the best was when they walked out because it was very easy to tell. When you skirt the line where you go, well, they're figure sized, but their condition isn't there. But if they were in wellness, they have just enough condition that they would be like top 2. Like, you're trying to look at bins almost like a kid looks at, is this dark blue or is it violet? And it's like, is that your job? Or is the job like already jaded where it's like, if you're trying this hard to suss out between where this person sits, did we create too many bins? You know what I mean? Like,
okay, I see what you're saying now.
We blurred the lines by making it available to too many divisions.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That is one of the biggest laments of bodybuilding right now, isn't it? Like, if you can cross over in divisions, how is that a possibility, Yeah,
I think that if the word, this is my view on it, right? If the word novice isn't attached to every division you've registered in, you don't get crossovers. That's the way I see it. If you
Yeah,
can't,
yes, that makes sense to me. It makes you should be the division that you are.
right. And if you don't know what division you are, you're a novice. So enter as many novice divisions and cross over as much as you want.
Honestly, if you don't know what division you are, you shouldn't compete.
The only disagreement I have with that is because I started out men's physique and in 3 or 4 years grew out of it. I wouldn't know that until, because this is what happened in the IFBB, right? You take a look at Steve Cook and then Jeremy Buendia and all these other guys, and they're getting bigger and staying in the same divisions. So you go, okay, well, this guy won last year and he's still that good, and now he's just bigger. And then you extrapolate that over 5 years and he's 30 pounds heavier, and you're like, okay, now if you don't weigh 210, you're not going to place. And you're like, yeah, but there should have been like a line where you go like, bro, you're a bodybuilder now. You got to move to a different division. You know what I mean? So like, I can understand that perspective, but the judges then, unfortunately, need to play the heavy and go, you're too big.
Sorry.
You got to go to bodybuilding. And if you enter men's physique again and you still look like this, you're just going to keep dropping. You got to move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't. They go like, well, they are still really good. Let's just roll them over. You know?
Yeah.
So this evolution of bodybuilding, and the reason I like that I have you in this conversation, is because you're looking at it from a women's perspective, where for me, I feel like the different divisions that were created for men's physique, men's classic, are just getting blurred to be different divisions of bodybuilding. Women's bodybuilding didn't start that way. Women's bikini didn't start that way. It's now to a point where they're trying to match the extremity of the men's side, where it's like, well, women's bikini should be thinner and more defined. And it's like, is that what bikini says to you? Is that what it means? Because I would love to hear your perspective. You believe, right? Figure, women's muscled categories should be more conditioned and should bring it in more. So then do you believe that women's bikini, hold on to your seats, folks, is a legitimate division? And if it is, do you believe that it's legitimate enough that they've brought the condition in to try to match the figure and wellness girls, and they should go the other way?
I was so excited I missed the last half of the question.
Start with the first half, and I'll reiterate the second half when I hear your answer.
Okay. God, you know how I really want to answer this. My knee jerk is like, fuck bikini. That is a joke of a division. But the only reason it's a joke of a division is because everybody and their mom shows up to participate in that division.
There you go.
Like,
I could agree with that.
Bikini competitors that are just like, whoa, shit. You know, if you do it right, a great fucking division. But everybody wants to that is the everybody gets to play division, and it's ruined it. It's the same as like fitness. Like, in our last podcast, that was the other reason I didn't do fitness, is so many people were like, fitness, that's a fucking joke. Like, you know, because you see girls go up there with their fucking routines and like, there's a ribbon. Yeah. Like, okay, I don't want to be seen as that kind of person. The same way, I'm sure like there are many bikini competitors that really take that seriously. And then, is your house burning down?
No, I'm listening to you. I look up like this when I'm thinking.
This way. Yeah. So many people participate and tarnish the reputation of bikini. Yeah. Also, as everyone says, like, it's just such a fucking girly cheerleader styled presentation.
It almost becomes hard to differentiate. You know what I mean? Like, it becomes so hard to differentiate because when the level of competition is that high, as you take a look at the Olympia or something like that, the difficult part becomes like, how do I suss out what is a better bikini body? Like, do you have to have bigger glutes? When do they become too big and now you're wellness and you should just cut it down and go to figure or something like that? Like,
bikini's tough. No, like, sometimes I look at the competitors, I'm like, they're just girls.
Yeah.
They're just really hot girls. They all look good. I don't know. Like, I don't fucking know.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Nirvana Super. Nirvana Super is HMB-infused water formulated by Dr. Naji, who is one of the lead medical research scientists at Vanderbilt University. Originally used to help stop muscle wasting in trauma victims as well as disease-ridden patients, this recovery tool boasts benefits like faster muscle recovery, increased joint health, a rise in physical endurance capabilities during exercising, and can even slow the appearance of aging. It also comes in some seriously good flavors and multiple delivery methods. So if you want to figure out how HMB can help you today, visit feelsuper.com and use Natty at checkout to save. Like, I would argue too, is it to a point where even if that was what the division was, where it's like they're just hot girls, is it a beauty pageant or is it a fitness contest then? You know what I mean? Like,
it's tough.
Yeah.
I guess the lack of respect I would say bikini competitors get is how much effort really goes into that division. For the majority of the competitors that show up. Again, there are competitors in the bikini division, no argument, great physiques, worked really hard, did their conditioning, did the diet. They just happen to have a bikini structure.
Yeah.
I have no issues with those competitors, but yeah, and then, yeah, I mean, that's the one that kind of sells a lot of ticket. Like, even at the Olympia last year, they axed women's physique and they axed women's figure because it didn't have enough of a draw.
Yes, that's what they said. Yeah.
Bikini and wellness stuck around. That's the shit people want to see.
And I also I would argue the same thing. And I mean I'm friends with IFBB Pro bikini. I mean, no disrespect, but there is a certain type of. Let me put it to you like this: if I wanted to enter a sailing regatta, and I made the entry fee $5,000. People would go, well, you know, essentially what you're doing is ensuring that the vast majority of people can't compete. Right. But the amount of people who have boats that can handle that is a Venn diagram that's a circle, right? The reason I bring that up is to say a lot of the times when we say it didn't draw a crowd, the type of people who compete and have a chance at women, you know, winning women's bikini, they tend to bring 50 people with them and they're all, you know, decked out in Louis Vuitton from top to bottom and Gucci and all this other stuff where it's like the ones who make it are also the ones that tend to have the entourage that gets the sticking your hand in your pocket and politicking kind of thing. Not to say that that's how you win shows, but it's a rent-a-crowd a little bit.
Yeah, that's what happened at Battle for Cancer. The girl that won was just like, she had brought like 20 of her friends and they were all yelling at her. Like,
and if we parallel that, right, if you do have a world-class physique, because, look, I've flown my parents out to Italy to watch me compete, and you best believe I fucking won that show. I've flown my entire family out to Vegas. You best believe I won all 3 of those shows. I knew I was going to win because I was that good. But, you know, what I mean by that is I was willing to put my money where my mouth was because I knew I had a shot, which is sort of what I was getting at, where it's like, the reason they draw the crowd is because they are of that 1% of the physiques that you're like, you've got a shot, we'll see you in finals. You know what I mean? So, well, then the other question that I had for you to piggyback off of that was this. I originally asked you in terms of how you felt as a woman in terms of bikini's legitimacy as a division, right? Now that you've given your legitimacy in terms of definition, do you believe that they should go as hard as they have, or that it should go the other way so there's a greater differentiation between the condition of your initial category of bikini to wellness to figure? How do you feel in terms of being that gender and also not competing in that division? I mean, should a bikini girl be that conditioned when she gets up there?
I think so.
I know that you like that. That's why I asked, is because you prefer that.
I like that because I feel like that's what the sport is. I feel like that is such a big part of the sport. I guess what I want to see is like, I want to see a fully conditioned bikini competitor stand next to a fully conditioned figure competitor, physique bodybuilding, and take a look at what that looks like. You know what I mean? Like,
so and then do you think a bikini competitor can be too over-conditioned? I'm talking dry, striated legs, you know, separations in the quads. Is that too much?
I mean, I guess, would that just not look right on a bikini competitor? And is that because they don't have enough muscle? And then is the question there to be asked, should that division exist?
Now I'm looking up because there's a beetle in my room. I was like, what the fuck is that noise? That's one of those, like, it's one of those little stink beetles. I'm fine with that. At first I thought it was like a wasp. So, I think that is the argument, is that when you get a female division that's not overly muscled, but is overly conditioned, I mean,
Yeah, right. It would just look bad.
it would look like an eating disorder, essentially.
Yeah, it would. It would look like an eating disorder. Yeah, and I don't know if we're arriving at something, but then does that beg the question, like, is that bodybuilding then? Like, if you can't be fully conditioned and still hold some kind of muscle mass to where the physique looks good, is that bodybuilding? Like, I don't want to knock bikini competitors because I don't know what they do as far as training, but like, I think that's another reason they take a lot of flack is how hard do they actually have to work to build muscle? Like,
So here's
you know?
a funny story. I was at the Arnold, and it was I think this was the first year they had wellness. It might be the second. In any case, the Arnold comes out, and I was there with Victor Martinez, so I got to see and hear things that the general public doesn't usually get to hear. And so he was backstage with Victor, and he looks at Victor, and he looked at Flex Wheeler, who is receiving an award, and he looks at them and he goes, "What is this?" And Victor's like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I don't get what this division is. Like, what is it?" So he goes out, congratulates the wellness competitor, who unfortunately her name escapes me right now, and he says to her, like, "Hey, what is this?" Like, in front of the crowd, and she goes, "Well, wellness is supposed to be, figure-sized legs or maybe even a little bit bigger but less conditioning, but a bikini upper body with maybe a little bit more shoulder cap definition." And he goes, "So how do you train for this?" And she goes, "Well, what's funny is I used to be a figure competitor, but I had to lose muscle on my legs every time to come into proportion. So what I do now is I basically do upper body 1 day a week, and then I train legs 3 days a week, and then I take a couple rest days every week so that I always keep my legs in size and condition, and upper body I really just don't do much at all." And he like looked at her, and I saw him go, and he goes, "Well, that explains it. Thank you. Wellness, everybody." And he just leaves. And I was like, he doesn't get it at all. Like, he just...
I'm glad you said that because he totally thinks he gets it. Like, that's like personal preference interference because I don't know. I respect wellness.
Sure.
Like, I do. Like, you training legs 3 days a week is no fucking joke. Like, that's some hard shit. Like, I don't knock that at all. Like, if you don't train up, if you're gonna knock wellness, you better fucking knock men's physique.
Oh no, he has before.
Like, upper body, like, yeah, you know.
He has before many a time, actually.
Okay. But that's what I'm saying is like I think that's his personal. And I'm sure there's people that are going to be like listening to this being like, "Layla, you're totally guilty of this too." But I feel like I can accept other things that I don't like and still accept them as valid, even if I don't like them. But I feel like Flex Wheeler just didn't like that she didn't train upper body or that wellness doesn't train upper body.
Yeah, but I think the reason I brought that up more was along the lines of kind of asking you, right? Because what we're talking about then is if bikini is not a bodybuilding, body being the key piece, right? If what we're saying is I would need to see how they train, how hard they train, that kind of thing to really see if the condition and muscle was built by the gym or just built by genetics or built at all.
That.
We're kind of falling into that same category of people who are genetically gifted with big legs for wellness, where it's like, how long before somebody really doesn't have to train upper body at all and just trains legs really hard twice a week and then that's it? And then the argument becomes, if they have the proportion the judges are looking for and clearly have bigger muscled legs than me or you, are we allowed to really tell them it's not bodybuilding if they tend to have like a myostatin deficiency and just build muscle better? You know what I mean? I'm not saying I have the answer to that. I just, I'm asking these questions sort of to blur the lines on purpose of like, this is sort of what bodybuilding has become nowadays, where it's like, is this a different thing? Or is this the same thing, just less? You know? I don't really know where... I'm curious now, even talking about how the evolution of wellness and men's physique started, as to what the next division is going to be, where it'll be like, women's Pilates or something, where you have a super big upper body and no legs or something.
Pilates?
Yeah, sure. I could do handstand push-ups and stuff, but I can't do legs. You heard it here first, by the way. Trademark. All rights reserved. Battleground Fitness. In case anyone tries to steal that.
I don't know. The wellness to bikini comparison kind of fucked me up.
Because
I'm just so much of the, okay, so, we haven't really talked about, I feel like, the topic in the way that I thought we were going to talk about it, which is like, I am just of the mindset of Dorian Yates, where it's like, this is fucking work. This is what we do, and we do it with our bodies, and that is how we show off how hard we work. And if that is not what you are doing and bringing to the stage, you are not doing the sport. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but it's not the sport.
Well, no, let's bring it right back to that, because that really does dial into the evolution of how we got here, which is, a lot of the big argument right now in terms of the evolution of that Dorian Yates style of training is guys and girls trying to bridge the gap of what they're able to do with performance-enhancing drugs, where it's like Dorian came out with what he took to win the Olympia in muscular development 3 years after he retired. And the consensus to the letters to the editor were he didn't have to fucking lie. If he didn't want to tell us, he didn't have to. And he goes, I wasn't lying. You guys don't understand. I didn't need all that shit that you guys are on. I only needed a little bit because I trained like that and because I was that good. Mm-hmm. And so the reason I bring that up is to say, are we seeing this explosive growth of blurring the lines between men and women's bodybuilding divisions simply now because that evolution has been taken off of the training side and placed more heavily on, if I'm not getting conditioned fast enough, I can always use Clen or Anavar toward the end of prep. If I'm not building muscle fast enough, I'll just take insulin and GH. Like, are we getting to a point where the reason the evolution of bodybuilding is not what you want to see it with Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman type characters, because people are trying to look like them as opposed to look like bodybuilders in their own frames the way those guys did? You know what I mean? Mm. Would you say, in terms of seeing it from your perspective, that you believe that's a problem that we have? And that's why the training side of the Dorian Yates type guys just isn't there anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's applicable to anything in life, really, that if you try to force feed yourself something that you are not naturally good at, it's going to look kind of wonky and weird at the end of the day.
Well, wonky and weird are two things it looks for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you should capitalize on your natural talents. That is what you're going to be best at, and that's where you're crushed. Do I want to do women's physique? Yeah, I do. I'm not built for that. I'm built for figure. Like, that's where I'm stuck.
I told people for years, it's really nice to tell people you're a bodybuilder. You know what feels better? Winning. Whether it doesn't matter if I'm this or that or whatever. If I just won a couple $1,000 and beat everybody else who trained for something and they just couldn't beat me, it feels better than being like, yeah, I'm a bodybuilder. No, I'm not. Too small. Not a bodybuilder. Classic physique at best. And if I was NPC, probably men's physique, to be honest with you. And even then, if I went to nationals, it would just be my head as a mop, just wipe the floor with me.
That's what
Not
I mean.
good. Not good.
No, I've often said that that's like the highest compliment you can pay a bodybuilder, is when you can tell what division they are just by looking at them. Like,
100%, yeah.
Right. Or if they get it wrong, like, are you bikini? Fuck you, dude. That fucking hurts.
The thing that hurts the most and will hurt until my dying breath was being in a movie about bodybuilding and having won the classic physique division title twice, and having them put in the comment or in the little thing when it introduced me when I was telling about bodybuilding, it says, Brandon Lirio, men's physique competitor. And I went, you got to be fucking shitting me. I'm the guy. I ran the division for 3 years. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, that shit fucking sucks. Like,
yeah.
It was probably an honest mistake, right?
100%.
Like, but it's like, how dare you?
Yeah. That part didn't feel, and every time the movie comes up and that pops up, I'm like, God damn it. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by NutraBio. NutraBio, with no compromise since 1996, they never hide behind proprietary blends and always tout transparent labels. With industry-leading formulations, all with clinical dosages of ingredients and products spanning from bodybuilders to athletes to just general health clients, NutraBio has exactly what you need to take your goals to the next level. Hit up NutraBio.com and use code word NATTY at checkout to save.
Yep. Okay, so if I'm being honest with you, what I thought we were going to talk about with old school versus new school bodybuilding was like the way new school bodybuilders are like all these advanced techniques and all this optimization and
that's
like
where I'm headed. Yeah, that was my next question, was moving into that stuff.
It's all the like West Side barbell types and kind of me, if I'm being honest, where it's just like you just go in there and you train until you drop.
Yeah, which is really funny that you brought up West Side Barbell too, because if you even watch West Side versus the World, which is the documentary that kind of explains how Louis Simmons and these guys became the strongest gym in the world, arguably at the time, it crippled 90% of them. Like
yes. Like I'm not anything in any extreme, probably not the right thing to do, right?
Right.
Can we all agree on that? But like it's the mentality that I'm trying to support there. It's like that's the way I want to train. Like honestly, I am very much the type train harder, not smarter. That's how I like to train. That is actually what I like to do.
And I'm the opposite.
No, okay. We should talk about this off camera, but that is why this year has been so fucking difficult.
Sure.
As I wrote myself next to somebody that is like super insanely smart and trains in all the right ways and wants to check my form, and I'm like, dude, I just want to throw shit at a wall.
But the funny thing was, I'm bringing up West Side again is because he read these books that the Russians were using to train their athletes to become stronger. And the injury rate using them wasn't that much higher. But he took them to this extreme of no time off, where if you take a look at an Olympic athlete, they're always training for something, but they have undulating periodization of deload weeks, deload months, months of full rest. Where these West Side guys, literally, there's a famous story where I believe it was Louis Simmons tore his quadricep right off the bone and literally went in the next day, and they were like, well, we're benching today, pussy, so start benching. And literally he benched so hard that like his incisions started bleeding. And it's like they don't there's no time off for them. They don't believe in time off.
Okay, when I said train harder, not smarter, I didn't mean don't train stupid.
But that's what I mean, right? The varying degrees of what people would consider training harder defined so differently sometimes, to the detriment of the lifter, that I'll be honest, the only reason I changed sports this year was because strongman gave me my first major injury I've ever had in my life when I thought I ruptured my bicep tendon. Yeah, I would have been back in there training if it wasn't painful, because I'm just I'm a creature of habit. I wanted to go back in and train. That's what I want to do. So when you have somebody who does rope you around the telephone pole, so to speak, and is like, no, sit here, I'll give you a treat, and then tomorrow we'll go for a walk. Just sit down, you know.
No treats.
But there's something to be said about that mentality of that old school type of put your head down and grind that creates maybe not the most lasting of champions in terms of how many times you can do it, but it takes your body to a level of extreme. And I said this in a podcast to somebody else very recently. When I went and did this powerlifting meet this week, I had to retrust my body to do what it was supposed to do. I asked a lot of it, but I needed to trust it would do it. And when it did, it performed. And I was very happy with that, right? But there comes a time where there are extremes that I would have taken my body to very physically when I was in my late 20s, that now, as I got close to some of the warning signs my body was giving me back then, that I would have to stop and be like, okay, reassess here. Because your tendons don't have the same strength, your ligaments don't have the same dexterity. You can bring yourself to the same level. I'm 100% a believer in that I still have the ability, and I will do it again, to bring myself bodybuilding, strength-wise, all of those sport-wises, to my best. But the speed at which I can sprint there has to be different. But that also means that I can't do every show the way I did back then either, where it's like I'm now trying to be a lasting champion where every time I show up, you remember me and what I looked like because it was world class, as opposed to a guy like, Patrick Mahomes, who it's like, I'm going to win the Super Bowl by running it in myself for the 14th time this game, even though I have a ruptured Achilles. Where it's like, okay, if you were 39 and you were Aaron Rodgers coming back from having his Achilles fixed, you probably wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So bringing that back around to a question for you, which is what you were just talking about, was, do you think that now that new training mentality of work smarter, maybe not as hard, is a detriment to the evolution of bodybuilding, or a new evolution where now you can see top 3 champions of those top 3 spots remain for longer periods of time, but at less of a freakish mentality? Like, look at Big Ramy, who basically for 3 years everybody talked about how big he was, and now everybody's like, dude, maybe stop. You know what I mean?
I think in terms to what working smarter has done for the sport, yes, it's done incredible things for the sport, and the things that people have been able to achieve with their physique and the way people have been able to dial it in. And there's no way around, and I've said this to you before, that when I started training with you, my physique changed completely. Like, obviously, something to be said for training smarter, not harder. But, and I can't speak for all of the old school lifters, but I think I can speak for all of the old school lifters. I think can I even say that?
You have the same mentality. You're an old soul.
I lump myself together with these West Side barbell fucks. It just seems fucking prissy, Like,
sure.
What body used to be was, training in a fucking basement like a moth to a lamp, just slamming yourself into shit again and again until you bled results. And now it's like, well, if I time my set and
and I think there's something to be said about both, but you take a look at the evolution of any sport, and it's like the reason why some of these world's strongest man guys were the way they were back then, even though they were working as accountants and, day laborers and construction workers, it was a hobby for them, right? And so we take a look at some of these records, and now you take a look at people like the Olympia, right? Let's face it. I'm going to catch some heat for this, but I don't care. Arnold Schwarzenegger is arguably one of the best representations of bodybuilding in general, whether then or now. However, if you put him with the criteria against the champions we have now, it wouldn't be close. Like, it would not be close, right? So if what we're talking about with that essentially is, hey, working smarter, not harder, produces a different look and a different result, that's also why a lot of world records are now being broken like this, and why physiques change from year to year in ways we've never seen them before, isn't because, I believe anyway, like this massive jump in human evolution. It's people taking their genetic outlying ability and their sports genes that are built into their genetic coding and maximizing their potential by using new information and new technology. But that also means listening to when it says, hey, you got to slow down for a little bit and recover. I understand your perspective too, though.
I agree with all of that. Like I said, it's inarguable what being smarter will do for any sport, any hobby, whatever.
Sure.
I think my grievance is when you do that, when you do have to apply additional brain power, you lose that animalistic rage and intensity and raw feeling, because suddenly you have to think about what you're doing and you have to plan it out, and Do
you think you can have both?
I do think you can have both. I do. But I'm the type of person that likes to be dialed in all one way or another. Like, when I go into the gym, and I've said this to you before and people have gotten mad at me, but I don't even want to say hi to people. Like, I am so dialed in, all I want to do is fucking crush shit for an hour and a half. And that's the relationship I feel like I have to the sport. And I think that's, why I'm caught in this weird cycle I am right now. Because that's not really what bodybuilding is. It's just not. It's just not.
So let's say this then, right? Do you think that using something like what we call like a rate of perceived exertion scale, where it's like, I want to go in there and crush it, and I want to crush it hard.
Yep.
Do you think you could use your perceived exertion to still use that anger and mentality, but just plan the game before you go in there and be like, now I can still go in there and just crush it, but my crushing it is to a 90th percentile, not just working to failure every single set. You know what I mean?
That's exactly. I like working to failure every single set. That is what I like to do. And the way I explained it to you a while ago was like, what I want to do when I'm here is completely liquidate my brain. I don't want to have to think about what sets I'm doing. Like if I want to do deadlifts back to back with squats and then do 20 reps of fucking wall throws, like that's just I don't know. Whatever feeling it is that takes over, like that's how I want to train. And that worked well for me for a while. But again, when it comes to bodybuilding, it's fucking Kimbo Slice versus a fucking train. Like I didn't want to be boxed in and structured and hefted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, except Kimbo Slice is dead and he died of a heart attack. Like, it's not good.
I mean, but like, in the streets, Kimbo Slice was Kimbo Slice and he was living his life the way he wanted to. Yes, you put him next to a fucking... Yeah. If you had put me back then, now on stage at the Olympia, it would have been laughable. Yeah, not really, but you know what I mean? Like, my physique changed a lot because of... It's inarguable.
Yeah.
New school evidence, data, whatever the fuck.
I would also argue the money, right? If there's $400,000 for the first prize that's available, I'm not just going to use, it's the same thing as like going to a sushi competition, right? I'm not going to use a kitchen knife if I know I could win $400,000. Give me the $1,000 sushi knife. Teach me how to cook this rice absolutely perfectly before I ever step in the ring. You know what I mean?
What the fuck is winning $400,000?
No. Like that literally is the top prize for the Olympia.
The Olympia?
That's what I'm saying. Did bodybuilding, but what I mean is
$3,000 getting the fuck out there.
But that evolution of, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to win turned from, I'm going to do everything I can to be the most grittiest bodybuilder so they'll call me the best, to there is life-changing money on the line. I don't care if I need to get stem cells injected into the bottoms of my feet when I'm hung upside down wearing a dress. I'm going to do it if it means I'm going to win. In fact, in the original Generation Iron, Branch Warren said it best, where he goes, I have one bodybuilding show in my career left to win, and I feel I can win it. And if it means I have to eat dirt, then I'll eat dirt. Like I'll do whatever it takes to win. And nowadays, if there's a guy who... is taking stem cell injections because it helps him recover faster and then not taking days off, you'll do that. But if what he's doing is using his day off to get stem cell injections and then going harder on the other days, people will try that. And then you have social media, blasting out videos and mentalities of them doing these things that then just get emulated in the gym, and it just alters the trajectory of how people think you get there. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And so I would argue that injection of large amounts of funds for sure was a catalyst in changing a lot of those things too.
Yeah.
Would you like it where they took the money back out of it and allowed it to just be a free-for-all, or would you think that would be moving in the wrong direction?
I that's hard for me to speak to because, it's never been about the money for me. I don't care.
Sure.
I don't care about that part of the sport. If I did, I wouldn't do this sport because there's no money in the sport.
But you know that the ones you do like watching do care about that.
The money?
Sure. I mean, nobody's competing at that Olympia level and being like, I don't care about the prize money. And if they are, they're lying to you. So I guess my question, to make it simpler, would be, if they decided to still air it the way they do on pay-per-view or whatever, but they took a majority of the sponsorship money by saying, like, we're not doing the commercials in between the divisions. Muscle Farm, like, we're not going to put your logo on the back of the stage. This is just a bodybuilding show, and we're giving the top prize to every division is $15,000. Do you think that would allow for a better catalyst of athlete, or a worse caliber of athlete, simply because the ones who are the best are now going to be looking elsewhere to, make better money?
Yeah, yeah. again, another applicable to life scenario. Like, if you're not going to pay me, I'm going to take my skills and talents, pack my bag, and go somewhere else and do something else. Like,
So then the follow-up question is very simple. Are we too far gone then to see a return to what we would like to see in bodybuilding, which is just rough and tumble fucking guys getting up there with the grit of what their physique can show off, and just, sure, I might be on some gear, but I didn't build this with gear. It was built on something else. Could we ever see that again, do you think?
I really don't know. I don't know. Because where do you draw the line for like one guy that only needs a little bit of gear and one guy that needs to take more gear, and then there's one guy over here taking a fuck ton of gear? Like,
I'll tell you, they don't draw the line at all. They just let him go.
yeah, yeah, all these incredibly weird things that competitors are doing nowadays, like the wellness girls that are injecting silicone into their glutes and shit like that before stage. Like, I don't know. Yes, ideally, theoretically, I would just love the true grit to see what you can do naturally as a human being with a little bit of genetics. Sure, I mean, there's no way around that, but that's what I feel like the sport is. Not like looking for all these like grasping ways to get your physique to pull off what you need it to pull off. Like, no, if you're not built for the sport in terms of your intensity and your dedication, it's not for you. Stop doing all of this extraneous shit.
So, at the same point, right, we have this evolution of a sport that you and I are very much involved in, so we'll kind of wrap it up with a question like this, right? You have boxing, who has started inviting social media boxers to fight each other and then other boxers eventually. You have MMA fighters that were made on social media that then are given UFC contracts or whatever. You take a guy like Sam Sulek, or let's take a look at a guy like Samson Dauda, who basically, and even World's Strongest Man, a guy like Mitch Hooper, who these guys are built on, and Andrew Jacked, who are built on their social media followings. They get well known. They go to compete in a show. In fact, I would argue that the first person to ever do it that way would have been Callum Von Monger, where he was, hey, this guy looks like Arnold. He's an up-and-coming bodybuilder, had all this, following around him, and then when he finally got to a bigger stage, everybody already knew who he was, and they wanted to either see him win or lose. Do you think guys like Sam Sulek and these other social media presences are eventually going to start getting special invites to nationals and things like that to try to build a newer, younger base of bodybuilding follower, and that could possibly be a next step in the evolution of bodybuilding?
I don't know jack shit about this. Do you think that's what's going to happen?
I believe.
Well, honestly, isn't that the direction in which the world is headed? Like, our celebrities are becoming our politicians, are starting to advertise for things they don't like. Influencers are selling products. Like, that is what we do now, isn't it?
So that's what I was asking, and that's why I think you hit the nail on the head, where it's like, do we have another option? The evolution of involving other athletes also has to do with what we talked about 3 episodes ago, which is with the change in technology and the change of availability of information. If I know that a guy like Sam Sulek is out there who has hundreds of thousands of not just followers, he's got millions, hundreds of thousands of comments in other bodybuilders' Instagram feeds are literally a blacked out version of Sam Sulek going like this, right? That means that he already has a voice without ever having to speak. As a business person, my business degree is 4 feet over there. If you don't capitalize on that, you're missing something. And that's how Mitch Hooper basically got into World's Strongest Man and wound up winning the holy triumvirate of the Rogue Invitational, the Arnold, and World's Strongest Man all in the same year, is because they saw that he had this following for very good reason, and he built off of it and became incredibly famous and good at the sport because of it. And you have these guys who are very good at social media that also happen to be pretty decent-ass bodybuilders that have enormous followings that eventually these old heads of bodybuilding are not going to want to spend $5,000 for the Olympia Special Experience weekend. But some young Bitcoin entrepreneur who wants to meet Sam Sulek might.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like dreading the day where they do start doing, maybe not special invitations to the Olympia, the Arnold, or Nationals, but a national qualifier where they say like, hey, we'll pay your entry fee, just come compete with us. I could absolutely see that happening without question, for sure.
You're right. No, I absolutely could too. And that's something that Dorian Yates was afraid of for a long time, hated on for a long time, was all these fitness influencers. Like, that's not bodybuilding. What is this? And I was of that team, of that mindset for a long time. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like I need to take a bit of my own advice. Like, you can't control where the world goes and what the world responds to and what it likes.
And I would argue, take a look at your own following and be like, what if, out of nowhere, Bev Francis Gym was like, hey, we want to invite you to Team Nationals because we have seen your following. We think you're good enough. You know exactly when the date is. If you want to come up for free posing seminars, we'll help you. But we think that you could help promote our show. So we'll make sure that you have a free entry fee and we'll tell you all that you need to know how to be successful in the actual show. But we want you to do X amount of posts per week, and we want you to do X amount of story posts, and we want you to do a seminar when you're here, and we'll give you a free table or whatever. Like, there's a piece of you that when you're at this, I know you wouldn't now, but there comes a time where you may entertain that thought. You may.
How does that benefit me?
That's the only question you're asking yourself now. There might come a time where it does benefit you, where all of a sudden you go there and let's say, they really like you and they invite you to this show. You wind up getting an IFBB Pro card, and then out of nowhere, they, offer you a bigger position in terms of being like, here's a connection to Hani Rambod. He now wants to coach you for free. You only have to give him X% of your prize pot if you win, but he's certain he can make you number 3 at the Olympia in the next 2 years.
Yeah, that's a different offer.
Right. Those, but they stair step up like that, right? That's the evolution of the offer.
I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I only accept offers I'm excited about, and I have to be instinctively, immediately excited about them.
Would younger Layla make that same choice?
I think so. I mean, when I started this sport and I was first taking off on Instagram, there were a couple federations that reached out to me that wanted me to go do their shows. They're going to pay for my whatever. I mean, I think that happens pretty often, so I don't want to talk about that. I said it's like some big time thing because I don't think that it is. But every time that happened, I'm like, that's not the way I want to do things,
Sure.
Also, I don't think that benefits me. I think that benefits you as the promoter, the show, whatever. Like, that doesn't mean I'm going to win. That doesn't mean, I don't know. Yeah, for as far as the trajectory of my athletic career, that doesn't do anything for me,
Right. Interestingly enough, I think that if the ask was big enough, right, and
I don't want to be the social influencer that shows up to a show to do a crowd draw. That's stupid.
Okay. I think I kind of see where your head's at, too. I mean, it's a little bit of a different thought process, but I get it.
Like, we have this big name influencer here that if I have won multiple shows, then yes, then I deserve to be there. But now it's just like, I have a big following on Instagram. Like, what? So what?
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. So as we kind of wrap this up, our main point in terms of the evolution of the sport of bodybuilding in general is just a change in the training mentality, a change in the way technology is leveraged, whether that be training technologies or social media technologies. But ultimately the one thing that Layla and I want to remind everybody is evolution is not always, in fact, most of the time it's a good thing, right? But you're going to vote with your dollar. And so if the evolution of a sport that you love so much is turning into something that you don't want to see, right? Take into the social media aspect of it is valuable, but at the same time, the only real value here is the US dollar and currency around the world. So we would encourage you to vote with your dollar and tell whether it be regular, untested bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding, strongman, powerlifting. If the sport or its figureheads are moving in a direction that you don't want to see, vote with your dollar. The same way Layla did, where she goes, I don't want to, get my place in the sport by just getting an invite and then showing up and having a lot of people think I didn't earn it, or feeling like myself I didn't earn it at night when I'm sitting in my bed alone and I have to really think about what I'm doing with my career. Vote with your dollar, guys. If you see something you don't like, but you still show up and you still throw your head in the hat, they're going to assume you may say you don't like it, but realistically, you're still feeding them. So, on behalf of all of us here at U-NATTY States of America, Layla, myself, and the entire world of bodybuilding, whether it be tested or untested, take your dollars out of your pockets, ladies and gentlemen. Vote with them. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe. Watch the full video on YouTube. And remember, if you see Layla in the crowd somewhere, let her know she probably should have taken that offer, because you would have loved to have visited her table at Nationals. You know what I mean? And I'll vote with my dollar on that. On behalf of both of us in the United States of America, I didn't mean to throw money at you, but we'll see you next time.
Yeah, those days are over.
Over! Wait, what?